Okay, let's dive right into this explainer, because today we're uncovering the unexpected truth behind what is easily the U.S. Army's most recognizable, yet totally misunderstood regiment. When you hear the Old Guard, you probably instantly picture pristine blue uniforms, perfectly synchronized movements, and those incredibly solemn ceremonies in the nation's capital. But what we're going to explore today is a fascinating duality that's going to completely change how you look at these soldiers forever.
So let's start with an image you're probably intimately familiar with. The absolute reverence, the profound silence, and that rhythmic precision at Arlington National Cemetery. Millions of people travel from all over the world just to witness it. But ask yourself, who are these soldiers really? Beneath the crisp uniforms and the mirrored sunglasses, what is their true identity when they aren't marching on that hallowed ground?
Well, before we completely pull back the curtain on their other life, we got to take a second to appreciate the immense weight of their public mission. The Tomb Guard platoon of the 3rd U.S. Infantry Regiment maintains a relentless, unending watch over one of our nation's most sacred sites. And I mean literally unending, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. Through punishing hurricanes, blinding blizzards, major holidays, that vigilance never, ever breaks. But as incredible as that discipline is, it's really just one side of the coin.
You see, the Old Guard acts as the Army's premier ceremonial face. They're made up of highly specialized units performing incredibly diverse, historically rooted duties. You've got the caisson platoon riding those beautiful horses to carry the fallen during dignified transfers. There's the presidential escort marching for visiting dignitaries. And you even have the fife and drum corps playing traditional marching music, literally wearing colonial-style red-coated uniforms and powdered wigs. It's an absolute masterclass in military pageantry.
But here's where we get that jarring pivot. Imagine putting the Army service uniform and those 18th century powdered wigs right next to striker combat vehicles and heavy body armor. Kind of wild, right? Well, that's because the 3rd Infantry Regiment isn't just some ceremonial placeholder. They are an active, fully deployable infantry combat unit. Every single one of these soldiers is an infantryman first. They're required to meet all the rigorous physical and tactical standards for combat, ready to answer the call of duty anywhere in the world. Which brings us to Section 1. The combat reality beyond the ceremonies.
Let's bring this down to a fundamental human level for a second. It's a mixture of excitedness and scared and nervousness. That quote comes directly from Specialist Jonathan Fields, an Old Guard soldier, right before his unit deployed to Camp Taji, Iraq, back in 2009. They were actually sent over to serve as theater internment guards at a prison facility. And what's amazing is Specialist Fields noted he volunteered partly because he felt this deep sense of duty to the other active units. He knew those combat-weary soldiers desperately needed a chance to come home to their families, and he wanted his unit to step up and shoulder that burden.
So, when the nation calls, they literally trade in those flawless ceremonial rifles for standard combat weapons. And their recent deployments show exactly how active they've been globally. The 2nd Battalion deployed to the highly dangerous Sunni Triangle in Iraq in 2003, which, by the way, was their first combat deployment since the Vietnam War. They've also been to Djibouti and the Horn of Africa for force protection, back to Iraq in 2009, and in 2011 they deployed to Kandahar province in Afghanistan to provide base security for U.S. Army Special Forces and Navy SEALs. This is not ancient history, folks. This is the very real, modern global war on terrorism.
Moving on to Section 2. Battle Legacy. Centuries of service. If we trace their timeline, we can see their roots actually stretch all the way back to 1784. That's the post-Revolutionary War era when they were organized as the 1st American Regiment. But I really want to draw your attention to 1847, the Battle of Cerro Gordo. Today, the Old Guard is the absolute only unit in the U.S. Armed Forces authorized by the War Department to march with fixed bayonets in all parades. And that's not just some stylistic choice. It is a profound ceremonial privilege that was literally earned through blood during a ferocious and successful bayonet charge during the Mexican-American War. Their combat legacy spans centuries, covering extensive campaigns in the Civil War, World War II, and Vietnam.
Now, you might logically be wondering, if they're the oldest unit, why are they the 3rd Infantry and not the 1st Infantry? Good question. Well, after the War of 1812 ended, the Army had this bloated roster of 44 separate infantry regiments, and they needed to downsize to just 8. So, in May 1815, they consolidated these regiments based purely on where they were geographically located rather than by their seniority. Because of that, the historic 1st American Regiment merged into the 3rd Infantry, meaning they didn't just inherit their status, they became the 3rd Infantry through a unique post-war consolidation that bound multiple historic, battle-tested units together into one incredible lineage.
Let's look at Section 3, Modern Dual Mission, Combat, and Ceremony.
Honestly, there's probably no better example of this unique synthesis than what happened in September 2016. 13 American soldiers who had fought in the 1846 Mexican-American War were uncovered outside of Monterrey, Mexico. When they were finally brought home and repatriated at Dover Air Force Base, the unit chosen to conduct the dignified transfer of those remains was, you guessed it, the Old Guard. Just think about that for a second. It's an unbelievably powerful full-circle moment. These modern active-duty soldiers of the 3rd Infantry were quite literally carrying their 170-year-old brothers in arms, soldiers who fought in the exact same conflict that cemented the regiment's legendary status.
So when you truly understand the weight of both their combat ferocity in places like the Sunni Triangle in Kandahar province, alongside their unyielding ceremonial discipline guarding the tomb of the unknown soldier, their historic regimental motto carries immense narrative power. Noli me tangere, touch me not. It's a phrase that perfectly encapsulates a unit that is simultaneously a solemn guardian of America's fallen and a highly lethal instrument of its defense.
The next time you watch a presidential inauguration on television, or maybe you see the caisson platoon pulling a wagon at a state funeral, or stand in absolute silence watching the changing of the guard at Arlington, look a little closer. Knowing their dual identity, how does it change what you see? I really hope this explainer leaves you with a profound new respect for this remarkable regiment, challenging you to always remember the combat-tested warriors standing quietly, resolutely, right beneath those pristine uniforms and ceremonial powdered wigs.